everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and here is my review for The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Did I get that right? Yes, I did. I was just making sure the colon was in the right place, and there wasn't an and or but or. It's really hard with these franchise films with these long subtitles, but luckily The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, see, I almost messed it up again, is going to be referred to most as the President Snow origin story, because that's what it is. We are seeing a young President Snow played by Tom Blythe, in the midst of the 10th annual Hunger Games, where he has to act as a mentor to a District 12 entry, Lucy Gray Baird, played by the awesome Rachel Zegler. I love Rachel Zegler. She was amazing in West Side Story. I liked her in Shazam! Fury of the Gods, even though I didn't like that film. I'm excited to see her here, especially given her singing chops. I didn't even know this film had a lot of singing. I know there was a lot of songs released before the film came out, songs with Olivia Rodrigo and with Rachel Zegler, but I didn't realize like they were singing them in the movie, which is really, really awesome. This is essentially about his mentorship of Lucy Gray Baird going into the 10th annual Hunger Games. That's kind of Act 1. Act 2 is the Hunger Games. And then Act 3 is kind of the aftermath of the Hunger Games. And the one thing I have to criticize as someone who didn't read the books, and maybe this is just a criticism of myself because I probably should have just read the book, because these are book to film adaptations, and I read the Hunger Games books before those movies came out. But the one thing that I think the trailers kind of ruined for me is the outcome of the games themselves, because the trailers show several shots that are very evidently taking place after the events of the first act, to where when the games start, you're like, wait, we haven't seen that scene yet. We haven't seen that scene yet. That means that this is probably what's going to happen in the games, and this is probably who's going to win the games, and this is probably what's going to happen to President Snow's hair after the games. It's stuff like that where I kind of, after seeing the same trailers over and over, you start to piece some things together. It's like in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, when the trailer showed that amazing shot of Rocket saying,
"I'm done running."
And so we knew what Rocket's fate was ultimately going to be when he's in peril in the movie. We know he's probably going to make it out of it alive because he still hasn't said that line yet in the movie. It's kind of one of those things where I wish they had just kind of kept the trailer focused on the first act or even the games themselves. But again, I didn't read the book, and 90% of the people who see this movie will have probably read the book, so it's going to be no surprise as to who wins the games or what happens or what the fallout is.
It's the things we love most that destroy us.
The reason I think I liked the first two acts better, that third act is just so stuffed that I feel like, as someone who didn't read the book, the third act especially kind of showed the flaws in the adaptation, in the sense that the third act was just so overstuffed. So many things were happening, quick things were happening with characters that we had barely heard about, and then certain twists and pivots happen. We don't necessarily know, did this person survive? Did this person die? Is this a hallucination? Is this not? And I think that's something the book will probably iron out better. I actually want to go read the book now, so I guess that's a testament to the movie. But I think as someone who didn't read the books, the first two acts are super engaging, because as someone who didn't read the books, I was genuinely interested to see not only how the games would go, but like what would President Snow's involvement in these games be, because he's just a mentor at this point. He doesn't run the games, and you can see how he starts to kind of maneuver and cheat the games as the games go on, and we can kind of see that sinister side of him, who is ultimately a very kind of respectable, well put together, nice, good-minded person at the beginning of the movie.
Welcome to the Capitol.
You look like you shouldn't be here.
I shouldn't, but I'm your mentor.
A rebel.
You can start to see that descent to kind of cynicism and anger and, kind of trickery that we see the older President Snow, played by Donald Sutherland in the Hunger Games movies, become. And I think Tom Blythe plays this role really well, showing that descent. Rachel Zegler, as I said, is amazing, and she really gets to show off her singing chops here, and is amazing in the singing chops, especially in the scenes where she is just singing for her life almost. Like, she has this agony or this anger built up, and she just lets it out from song. And it feels weird on paper, probably in premise, but in the execution of the movie and the actual presentation of it, it doesn't feel weird. Like, a lot of my audience was really digging the singing, and I think there are people that may see this movie that may be like, the singing was a little weird, a little awkward, but I think also because she's so talented, but also because of the stakes of the movie, and because she is such an open spirit of a character, I think the singing bits really, really worked, especially in the games. The moment where she sings in the arena is really, really powerful. Like I said, the first two acts of this film are near flawless in my opinion. Like I think they are so well executed. The first act in setting up what's about to happen, the second act being the games themselves. Now, obviously, if you've never seen a Hunger Games movie or you've never read the book, you may be a little lost because they don't really explain how the games work. They don't really explain the ideas of certain elements of it. But this is also the 10th annual Hunger Games, so a lot of the stuff we know about the Hunger Games from the 74th annual Hunger Games that we see with Katniss Everdeen, a lot of that is kind of inspired by what Snow does in the 10th Hunger Games. So I don't think you're missing a ton having never seen those, but I think watching the Hunger Games movies gives you a deeper appreciation for everything. Like there are callbacks, or I guess call forwards, because this is a prequel to some Hunger Games stuff. I mean, they mentioned Katniss, not the character, but a plant that Lucy Gray calls a Katniss, which kind of is a nice little Easter egg. You also see Jason Schwartzman's character plays Caesar Flickerman's father. There's a great scene where Jason Schwartzman calls a restaurant and says, "Hey, can you make my reservation for a little later? Two adults and a high chair," and the high chair obviously being Stanley Tucci, but as a baby, which I thought was a fun callback. Like things like that, where it's not in your face. This isn't a film trying to be a fan fiction, like over the top. Here's all the Hunger Games lore from future movies at you. There are a few hints and glimmers, but this is mostly just a story about Lucy, a story about Snow and their relationship. I think their relationship in terms of romance is a little weaker than just their mentor-mentee relationship. I almost would have preferred if it was just a friendship. Like I think the romance angle probably would have been better developed if they had taken a little bit more time to develop. But I think it would have worked just as well, just being a mentor-mentee relationship. But then again, I didn't read the book. Maybe they flesh it out better there. I think this is a solid film, though. I have issues with the third act, but ultimately, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a well shot, well executed blockbuster. I think nowadays blockbusters got a lot of hate because of the visual effects. I myself have kind of like partaken in those criticisms, especially with like Marvel. But I do think this case scenario, I think the visuals look really good. I mean, there's snakes that look real, obviously. Sorry, Stacy, I know you're watching this review. You shouldn't see this movie because I know you're afraid of snakes. Dad, I know you're afraid of snakes as well. Don't watch this movie, I promise. It's a lot of snakes. But I really do think the actual set designs are all really good. Because this is the 10th annual Hunger Games, it's almost a little bit more scaled down to what we'll see in the 74th one. So I think it's also a really nice, almost period piece, even though obviously all this stuff is happening in our future, it's happening in the past of the universe that we know the Hunger Games to be. So there's also a really cool element of that where we can kind of see the shapings of Panem only 10 years separated from the first Hunger Games, and then see it later when we watch the Hunger Games movies and see how the world has expanded, how the games have expanded. I think there are some other great supporting performances. I think Peter Dinklage is doing his best kind of Tyrion Lannister light here.
Your role is to turn these children into spectacles, not survivors.
I think Viola Davis is someone who, watching the trailer, I was like, I am not a fan of that. And then I watched her in this movie and I'm like, oh, wait, I'm the biggest fan of that. I think her performance in this is legitimately amazing. And I would say it's her best supporting performance of the year, even better than Air. I think she is legitimately fantastic in this movie.
Let's see you use that famous snow charm.
Playing kind of the Effie of this movie, the character that Elizabeth Banks played, but doing so in a much more sinister way, in a much darker way. She's got like the kooky presentation of an Effie, but the kind of more effed up mind of a President Snow. Like I really love her character in this. I love her portrayal, I should say. Her character is evil, but I love it.
Mr. Snow, let me ask you one final time. What are the Hunger Games for?
I think it's a really solid movie. I think the only criticisms I can have about the first two acts is that, like the other Hunger Games movies, a lot of the tributes we just don't get to know well enough to where their deaths don't really mean anything. There's really only one person in the arena that we fully care about, and that's Lucy. The other characters, I could do with a little bit more character development so we at least care about them. But that's also a criticism I have with the other Hunger Games films, because when you're adapting a book, you can't possibly put everything in. And even then, that film was centered around Katniss's POV. If you remember from the first Hunger Games movies, Peeta is very much a supporting performance in that film. It's very much all about Katniss. I would say Rue has more character development than Peeta in that first movie. It's not till the second and third and fourth movies that we see a lot more development of Peeta as a character. And I think that's the same here, where Lucy Gray is the highlight of those tributes. and the rest of the tributes don't get a ton else to do character wise. We obviously know that that's the mean one, that's the really strong one, that's the outsider, that's the poor girl who is so young and sweet and I don't want anything to happen to her. We do still have those archetypes, but they are archetypes, they aren't fully fleshed out characters. But that is also a criticism I have with the Hunger Games, so I don't think that's anything new for this universe. I think by nature of what these films are, you're just going to have characters that are underdeveloped, and I think that's okay. That third act, it's a mess, but I still enjoyed it, and I think they stick the landing in like the last 5-10 minutes to where I really do think it's a satisfying watch, especially for a blockbuster. It's a refreshing blockbuster because it's tied to an IP, but it's been a while since we've had Hunger Games movies. I think this is kind of a sign that maybe the reason why some blockbusters are getting bad reception is not because they're necessarily that bad, but maybe it's because we've just been having so much of the same thing that after so long, it becomes tiring. Whereas Hunger Games, it's been, how long was it? Like 2015? It's been about 8 years. 8 years is enough time removed, I think. I mean, look at the Star Wars movies. The reason The Force Awakens was so beloved is because the last movie had come out in 2005, and that one was 2015. That was a 10-year gap. There's a reason some films hit really well. Top Gun Maverick was almost 30 years after Top Gun. So I think legacy films and prequels can work if you give it enough time to where it really feels like you've missed this universe. It's like a good thing is a good thing when you realize how much you've missed it. And I think that was the thing with the Hunger Games. I didn't love Mockingjay Part 1 or Part 2, and I don't even love the style of the first Hunger Games, the shaky cam. I think Catching Fire is probably the strongest of all those 4 original films. But I think in general, having spent 8 years without a Hunger Games movie, I think this was almost like a welcome return. And it was nice to kind of fulfill that, missing part of the palette. So I think that is a good sign. I don't know how this is going to do financially. Obviously, I'm recording this right after I saw it, and I don't know what the box office results are going to be because I'm now on an island somewhere on vacation. So obviously, I don't know what the box office is going to be. I hope it did well. If it didn't, then maybe it is too soon for a Hunger Games reboot. But I'm interested in reading the book. I think it did the job in telling a really engaging story, even if there are definitely flaws in the third act, flaws with some of the characterizations. But the performances are good enough. Again, Rachel Zegler's queen. She's amazing. Thank you so much for watching. That's my review for The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It's such a long title. I just hate saying the whole thing.
It's a mystery, and mysteries have a way of driving people.
But stay tuned for some more reviews this week coming. There are a lot of reviews I've kind of kept on the back burner because I'm going on vacation, as I said. So I'm going to release a bunch of videos at the same time or in the same few weeks. So be on the lookout for some other reviews like Killers of the Flower Moon, The Holdovers, a big New York Film Fest recap with The Zone of Interest, Priscilla, Maestro. So thank you so much for watching this one. Check out the others and stay tuned for a lot of fun stuff coming in December and onward. And happy Hunger Games. May the odds be ever in your favor.